Well, we certainly are in full-blown talking season. I wanted to talk about something that Jordan Rodgers said last week while we were at media days. It was a curious conversation. Sometimes the best time to listen to folks is when they don't have scripted moments. And this is one of the things that Jordan, I think he was talking with Roman Harper at the time. He said, "I'm concerned about Texas. Honestly," he said, "I really like Georgia. I think that what they did on the offensive side of the portal will be the most impactful. They went out and got Noah Thomas, who is from Texas A&M, and Georgia has not had a 6'5 X-type receiver that can change the way you cover since George Pickens." He said the receivers have been the Achilles heel for this offense for a couple of years. "I think that receivers, talking about at Georgia, have been average. They are elite now around Gunnar Stockton. They are elite now around Gunnar Stockton." And he goes on to say, "Cold Gunnar Stockton came in and beat the best version of Texas we have seen in a long time. I still think Georgia is the cream of the crop in the SEC. Georgia's defense, which is what Kirby is known for, was not what we were used to seeing out of Georgia in 2024, and honestly a little bit in 2023, not as much, but a little bit in 2023. So look, there's a lot to talk about there. I mean, there's a group of four at the top of the SEC, and that's Texas, Alabama, Georgia, and LSU, not necessarily in that order, because I'm going to go on to say this. It sure seems like Texas and Georgia are the two teams. They are the betting favorite. They were picked by they are the two favorites to get to the SEC championship game. Georgia plays both of them. Texas only plays Georgia. Alabama, plays LSU, and so that will be tricky for Alabama. But the fact of the matter is that one thing that Roman Harper was talking about in this time was that Georgia's got all their tough games at home. Talking about Alabama and Texas, I don't think those are Georgia's only two tough games. I think that we'll see what happens with the Gators. We'll see what happens with Tech. But once you start talking about going to Tennessee, going to Auburn, those are going to be challenging games. I think Kentucky. Kentucky and Mississippi State, no, those should be relatively decisive victories for Georgia. One of them was a season ago, one of them was not. I think when you start, and the one that was not was on the road. I think when you start talking about, you have concerns with Texas. I think you have concerns with everybody in the league to some degree, at least. This is just we're at a point here where there are some really good quarterbacks in the SEC, but they're not yet superstars. I don't know who the dominant defense is in the league. It should have been Texas last year. They lost a lot of parts. Georgia has regressed on the defensive side of the ball. Kirby, a lot in the offseason, particularly at media days, has been talking about how he wants his team to become, more, not necessarily more physical, but better against the run and with the run. You got to run the ball when everybody knows you got to run it. It's third and say 4, certainly third and 2. You need to convert those as an offense, and if you're a defense, you got to stop it. One of the biggest plays in the last, few games was what Dan Jackson did on third down and short against Georgia Tech. He forced a fumble, but if he'd not forced a fumble, and Georgia Tech fans can get in the comments below about, their feelings, he stopped King on that play. That would have been a fourth down. Would Tech have gone for it then? Maybe. That would have been something else. But we won't know because Dan stopped that play, forcing a fumble with the ball. And, Georgia, 3 plays later, quickly went down and scored a touchdown. Carson, I can't remember who he hit. I think it was Lovett, maybe. That was, Georgia rallying to win that game was something else. I'll say that. But they did what they had to do when they had to do it. And, Alabama against Georgia in 23. in the SEC championship game. They basically ran the ball when they had to run it to kill the clock, and Georgia didn't stop them. And that's why Alabama won the SEC championship in 23, and Georgia didn't get to play for the national championship. It was because of the basic stuff that you have to do. You've got to be able to do what you need to do when you need to do it. Texas against Georgia, last year, first of all, couldn't stop Jalen Walker, number one. But it wasn't just Jalen or Mikael Williams. It was, Everett made a lot of good plays when they needed to slow Georgia down. They had the lead at the half in the SEC championship game. And, here comes Gunnar Stockton, cold Gunnar Stockton, as Jordan Rodgers would say. And I've kind of gotten off the point here. But, he said, his big thing is, with what Texas has lost, that's going to be a lot to replace. With what Georgia has gained, talking about the receivers specifically, and he's an old quarterback, does Georgia now have what they need on the outside to be sort of a vicious offense? We're going to see. We're going to see. I don't know. And I think that if you're Gunner, all of the team runs and the workouts and the leading on that front, that's really important. And you have to convert all of that into mattering during games. When you do that sort of stuff, guys will believe in you. Guys will say, he's doing what he's supposed to do. And I've seen enough of him to know that he has tremendous understanding of how to play that position. His anticipation with throws is very good. But there was a disconnect. I think what the critics of Gunnar Stockton are leaving out / don't know or choosing not to say is there was a disconnect at Georgia on the offensive side of the ball the entire season in 24. The quarterback was the same. The offensive coordinator was the same as 23. But there was something missing the whole time. And when Gunnar came in there, that didn't suddenly get fixed. I think that the inability to run the ball traditionally was a real problem. There were far too many injuries. But even when they were healthy, they weren't playing effectively the way they should have, slow rolled Florida right out of that game. And they couldn't do it because they needed Carson at times, and Carson was making mistakes in that game. So, Carson had a really bad October, I guess it was, whatever it was, multiple games where he just didn't play well. And Florida was one of them. Texas was one of them. You can't survive that forever. And, he didn't play bad against Ole Miss, but they couldn't run the ball. And after a while, they didn't need to run the ball. So this is really going to be about, do they have what they need on the outside? Because they just didn't last year. It just wasn't there. And the addition of those three receivers alone, that are the sort of older receivers, Thomas, Young, and Branch, that allows you to do things with Dillon Bell that, you were asking Dillon Bell to do stuff last year that now he can do all of the widget stuff that makes him uber scary. Dillon Bell has a lot of skill, but I don't know if you always want them. The better the receivers are, the more of them that you want. And last year, he just didn't have a great season. The receivers didn't have a great season. They were, Carson was not playing great. It felt, I guess, looking back on it at times, that guys were pressing. But, did Texas lose so much and Georgia gain so much that there's, reason to think Georgia should be the favorite? That's why I think it's a coin flip. I think those two teams, it should be a coin flip. Now, if you're Texas and you go to Athens and you lose, and then you go to Atlanta and you got to play Georgia again and you lose, then at some point you got to be like, why are we playing these guys in Atlanta? Why don't we do this thing in Dallas? Which would be a very curious conversation to have. But there's no certainty that Georgia will beat Texas in Athens. There's no certainty that Georgia will get back to Atlanta like they've been, every year this decade except the first year. There's no certainty that I think Texas, Georgia, Ohio State, and Alabama have the best rosters in college football. I think the question now becomes, what can you do as a coaching staff to take advantage of all of the pieces of the puzzle that you've got? Kirby talked about how he really enjoys the process of building the team. It's like a puzzle, and putting all the parts together. And one of those parts is going to be Dylan Bell, but it's also going to be Noah Thomas. It's also going to be, wherever, whatever. Offensive linemen can be playmakers too, believe it or not. But they've got to get it to where it all works together. And I think for Texas too, just to get on, what Jordan was saying at the end, or at the beginning, I should say, I think Texas has got a lot of moving parts too. You lost a very good offensive tackle. You lost a multi-year starter at quarterback that got you to the playoffs twice. I mean, once as a conference champion and once as narrowly not the conference champion. I mean, Quinn Ewers, they won a lot. And I'll tell you right now, if Arch doesn't win, then people will, this is going to be a Chris Sims situation with Major Applewhite. But my suspicion is that he'll win, so we'll just see. But I think the two teams are evenly matched going into the season. I think Texas having to come to Athens, that's asking a lot, but it was a lot to ask of Georgia to go to Austin too. Thanks for watching.